Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to start in a few minutes. Just got a few people signing in. I'm sadly very excited because I've streaming this live on YouTube. I don't even know what that means, but I think it's streaming live. Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to start in a few minutes. Just got a few people signing in. I'm sadly very excited because I've streaming this live on YouTube. I don't even know what that means, but
There we go.
I think
can
it's
see the echo of it.
Hi everyone, welcome. We're going to
just
start. Cut that out so we don't get the echo. That's what it means. Sorry about that. So get yourself a cup of tea. We'll be starting. Make sure it's decaffeinated because we're talking about sleep. And we'll start in about 3 minutes' time. Hi everyone, let's make a start. Saturday afternoon at the end of Mental Health Awareness Week, and we wanted to do something to support that incredibly important focus. And we're going to talk about sleep today. And I thought we'd introduce you to some of the work we do as well, but we're particularly passionate about helping people change their lives. So I'll introduce myself if you don't know who I am already as I go through the presentation, and we'll hopefully by the end of it give you some pointers to the sorts of behaviors that you'll need to put in place to improve your sleep. And let's face it, sleep is a massive issue for lots of us. This is being recorded, so I will send it out as well. Hopefully it will be incredibly useful. So our mission as a company is to bring neuroscience to lots and lots of our clients. That's schools, businesses, organizations, individuals and families. That's all of those groups all of the time. And we've got resources that all go all the way down to 5-year-olds, trying to explain the incredible information about our amazing brains. And today's focus is going to be on one of the most important of the 12 daily habits that we all need to practice to get the most out of our incredible brains. You've got 86 billion neurons. A single neuron is capable of 10,000 individual connections. We've got everything that we need at the top of our neck, but no one gave us a manual. So this is that manual. We have been running for 3 years. Our company is called Action Your Potential, to give you a sense of the level of interest in biology that is inside our company. And action potential is an electrical impulse moving down a biological wire, a neuron, and our company isn't called Action Your Potential, because it is about taking your action potentials and making sure you get the most out of living in a brain. So working in 120 schools, that's primary schools, secondary schools, colleges. We're working with businesses as well, supporting productivity, well-being, supporting staff with one-to-one coaching around the things that we're going to talk about tonight. And we've got an innovative program that walks people through how to change their brains, which is just amazing. Just the idea that you can change your brain. You're not stuck just being the way you are. You can grow and develop. And actually, part of my mission is to help you change your mind about what you are. Actually, the brain tells itself a story every single day about what it is, and the brain builds the mind every day. If we change our mind about what we are, we can literally change our brain through repeat activities and behaviors, and that can open up a whole different way of being. And sleep, obviously, is a fundamentally important part of well-being. The difficulty we face is if we live by accident in our brains in the 21st century, it's very likely to become a difficult and challenging experience. Post-pandemic, we're seeing a rise in mental health issues, but actually before the pandemic, we were seeing an uptick in mental health issues. And I think behind the scenes, what's actually happening is the intense nature of living in a complex, uncertain, interconnected global world in the 21st century upsets some very ancient architecture in the human brain. And I think that's the problem that we face. So we need to get much more metacognitive. We need to live inside our brains, understanding what they're doing, using the circuits that have developed to explore and self-monitor our behavior and other people's behavior to look at our responses and adapt and develop them. So we need to live by design in our brains every day. We need to plan every day. We need to make sure that we're practicing a set of habits every day to get the most out of our brain. And everything I'm going to talk about tonight is fully referenced by the neuroscience, the psychology, the cognitive science. If you need the papers that back up what I'm saying, just ask and we'll let you know the details of those. I was recently at the British Neuroscience Association conference. We're very much looking through the neuroscience as it's developing and constantly updating our advice and our resources on the basis of what the scientific papers are saying. So we're bridging a set of very detailed disciplines, trying to bring you usable information that you can apply to your daily lives. So that's me, ex-teacher, 25 years in schools, but now 3 years outside schools running the business that has just ballooned. And I think it's because actually the brain is incredibly fascinating. And do follow us on social media. We post lots of things about the brain. We are, as you will tell from the kind of contents of this webinar, really passionate about it. So our core mission is to help everyone go from being a brain bot, living in their brain, just following its little programs, to becoming a neuro ninja, which basically means living in our brain with flexibility, responding rather than reacting, not suppressing emotions, not pushing away automatic negative thoughts and some of the habitual default ways the brain responds, but understanding what's going on, connecting the brain, the body and the mind in a way that isn't yet done in medicine. It will be eventually once the neuroscience joins up the bits. Medicine still divides mind and body. You know, we talk about mental health and physical health separately. They're completely interrelated. The brain builds the mind every day. There's nothing extra required. And so the physical state of the brain affects the quality of the mind we get to live inside. So to be a neuro ninja, you need to learn 10 skills divided into 3 strands. Well-being strand, and we're going to look at one aspect of well-being, sleep, shortly. Mind management, living in a negatively biased brain. More on that in a minute before we get to sleep. Managing worry, choosing growth, bouncing back from setbacks. Brains respond in particular ways to setbacks, partly because the brain is a parliament of neurons and they've all got different jobs to do. So they'll all respond to feedback in a slightly different way. And the thing that we're probably most passionate about, alongside well-being, is helping people learn more effectively and helping people be more productive. You might think, listening to this, that you are a procrastinator and nobody else is. Every brain is a procrastinating brain. Every brain wants to save energy. And when it comes to doing difficult, cognitive, heavy lifting work, the brain will try and avoid it if it possibly can. And that's what procrastination is. So these are 4 skills that support getting the most out of our brain, rocking up to do the stuff we need to do when we need to do it. So today we're going to look at why sleep is fundamental to well-being, how to get nerdy about behavior change, so how we can build those changes into our life. We're going to make some suggestions about how you might improve your sleep. So we don't see the world as it is. We see it as our brain does, and our brain is full of biases. One of the most significant and important biases that we need to get our head around, and one that I wish I'd been told years ago, is that our brain activates 3 times more powerfully when it's processing negative information than it does when it's processing positive information. Now, that's very upsetting because that negative information generates strongly charged negative emotions. Why is that? Because in the ancestral past, 30,000, 50,000 years ago, being cautious and anxious and imagining the worst case scenario, say from that noise in the forest, that might be a predator. I'm not going to go into the forest today. That kept our ancestors alive. Happy, joyful cave people that ignored the noise in the forest and went in anyway, got eaten and didn't get to pass on their happy, joyful brains to the rest of us. So we're living in a brain that activates more powerfully when it's experiencing negative information. We're obsessed with bad news. The newspapers know that and sell us back bad news all of the time. Bad news is what gets our brain fascinated. And the reason why is because the brain is a prediction engine. It's trying to work its way through the day, avoiding problems, and bad news enables it to work out there are particular problems to resolve. And that's why it activates more for bad news, which means even if you have a reasonable day and something mildly annoying happens, it may become the focus of our thinking. So all of our work is held together by 3 big ideas. The first big idea is the brain builds the mind. And there's very strong evidence from neuroscience that brains build minds, and the mind runs milliseconds behind the brain. So the mind is the way the brain communicates with itself about what it's doing and how we're doing in the world. And that's what consciousness is. It's the brain speaking to itself about how it's doing and communicating across the whole of the brain. Not everything that's in the brain appears in the mind. We don't get a readout internally of our blood pressure. Our brain knows what our blood pressure is. Our brain is monitoring all of those sorts of things. But in the mind, we're very much focused on the outside world and us within that world. The brain circuits we use the most flavor our mind the most. So if we get good at a particular skill by practicing it and encoding it into the physical structure of our brain, that skill is available to us. But the brain makes no distinction about whether that skill is positive or negative. So it might be playing the guitar, it might be learning Spanish, it might be overthinking, worrying, and being paranoid. Whatever we do with our brain begins to shape the connections within it. And then finally, brains deal with 3 sorts of information, and they're particularly good at generating opinions and beliefs, which are effectively predictions that it puts together into viewpoints on the world to enable it to give faster responses. So brains use facts, and that's probably the best way to peg our behavioral responses to the world, to base them on facts. And when we've done that as a species, we've made the biggest advances. Just witness, the rise of all those COVID vaccines in the last 10 months or so, based on evidence-based factual responses to the world. And that's probably the best way to tether our own behavior. But brains generate opinions all of the time, and they sometimes confuse facts and opinions. The whole of LBC's output is really a set of beliefs and opinions being shouted at each other by different people. Brains constantly develop opinions, and they constantly develop beliefs. Brains develop growth affirming beliefs and growth defeating beliefs. And the same brain can be holding both growth affirming and growth defeating beliefs within the same day, possibly even within the same hour. Beliefs are fossilized opinions which we haven't gone back and checked out. Like this lady here, she's got a belief that she can't do maths. Her mum couldn't do maths, her nan couldn't do maths, her great grand couldn't do maths, she can't do maths. It's not true. She might find maths more difficult than, say, English, but with brains, if you repeat and develop through practice any skill, you can improve anything, even if you don't want to. So we would say very loudly to all of our clients, you are entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And we're going to give you facts about how your brain works. And it's okay to change your mind. Changing opinions and changing your beliefs is part of the process of being a neuro ninja. We need to live in our brain in a fluid way. And that means as more information becomes available, we can change our behaviors, and that's fine. So our brain generates our mind, and our mind changes every single minute of every day on the basis of which neurons are firing. So as you wake up in the morning, you come out of sleep, a profound brain state, completely different from being awake. Sleep generates a set of sleep inertia as the brain's moving from one state to another, that groggy feeling that lasts anywhere between 20 minutes to 50 minutes. That's called sleep inertia. The brain is building that day's mind. And I just want to connect you with the research behind this strange idea that the brain builds the mind, because it is a little bit upsetting and a little bit curious. So back in the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet did an experiment which has been repeated many times since and cited in lots of papers, where he looked at action and when people willed things to happen and what was going on in their brain. So 1.5 minutes of Benjamin Libet's experiment.
Put your hand in front of you and flex your wrist. You presumably first had a thought, flex my wrist, that then caused your wrist to move. That's how it seems. But Benjamin Libet's experiments in the 1980s have cast some doubt on that. In his neuroscience lab, he wired up subjects to an EEG machine measuring brain activity via electrodes on their scalps, and then asked them to choose to perform a simple hand movement when they felt like it. He also got them to record the time at which they made a conscious decision to move their hands. Disconcertingly, he found evidence of brain activity initiating the movement hundreds of milliseconds before the conscious decision was reported. In other words, his experiments seemed to show that the conscious decision didn't cause the movement. The brain activity bringing about movement started before the individual willed anything to happen.
So you can imagine that freaked everyone out at the time. What do you mean, I'm not willing my hand to move? Yes, you are willing your hand to move. Your brain is you. Your brain is the actor. Your mind chases behind the brain, nano to milliseconds behind, mirroring whatever our brain is doing. So that means that whatever state our brain's in is going to have a profound effect on the flavor of our mind. And this is where we get into these 12 daily behaviors that are one of the fundamental behaviors that are powerful changes to be neuro ninjas. So 12 rocks of well-being, 12 daily habits that we need to clock in every day in terms of living in a balanced nervous system between our sympathetic nervous system, gets us ready for action, and our parasympathetic nervous system calms us down. And 9 of these rocks engage the parasympathetic nervous system and move us between our nervous systems, connecting up lots of different circuits across the whole brain. One of the most important of the rocks is sleep, and that's what the rest of this webinar is about. So just a little bit of the science behind sleep. We're mostly going to talk tonight about how to build great sleep. So there's a huge welter of evidence as to what sleep is for, and it does a whole bunch of things. It is important for the body, for memory, for processing emotion, for building immune cells, for managing blood pressure, for managing the whole cardiovascular system, for cleaning the brain, for reducing fatigue in the prefrontal cortex. If you get less than 6 hours sleep a night, you get 30% less memory available the next day. Memory is encoded overnight. Problems are solved overnight. Emotions are processed overnight. Less than 6 hours sleep, you're more anxious, more emotional, more socially clumsy the next day. So you're going to make more social errors and you're going to fret and worry about them more. 70% of our immune cells are built at night. Our blood pressure and our blood sugar systems are managed at night. The brain literally cleans itself at night. Each neuron, there are 86 billion neurons. Those are the brain cells, but they're supported by 86 billion glial cells, which supply neurons with all the things they might need, the ions, the food that they need in order to fire. And the glial cells contract at night and enable a fluid called the cerebral spinal fluid to drain through the brain, clearing the brain of fatigue chemicals. One, for example, called adenosine, which builds up during the course of the day and stops the easy flow of electrical impulses around the brain. Adenosine clogs up the gaps between neurons, the synapses. Also, you may have heard of amyloid protein, which builds up in the brain overnight. And that is the protein that begins to kill brain cells when people start experiencing the ravages of Alzheimer's. Amyloid protein is cleaned out during the course of deep sleep, NREM sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. So everything in this paragraph, scientists have linked very strongly in a number of studies to sleep. So it makes you live longer, enhances your memory, makes you more creative, makes you look more attractive, keeps you slim, lowers your food cravings, protects you from cancer and dementia, wards off colds and flu, lowers your risk of heart attack, strokes and diabetes. You even feel happier, less depressed and less anxious. So in order to get good sleep, we need to introduce you to a land of nets, threads, iterative, incremental and involved change. If you're going to change your brain, the best way to do it is incrementally, iteratively, and with your involvement, which basically means you focusing on a couple of habits at a time and being really clear throughout the change where you're aiming. Brain cells grow at the speed of a plant, so we can't expect instant change. To get change to happen, it means repeat activities over days and weeks and months. So change is best built in the brain in small steps. So the way to conceive of this is a net is a group of behaviors that will transform our lives. Each net is made of a series of threads. That's a single behavior or change. And engaging in that process of building a net from threads is called a daily life experiment. And you're taking these ideas, these proven techniques to improve things like sleep into your daily experience and adding them in. So to build great sleep, these are the threads that you need to engage in over perhaps 8 to 12 weeks to really engage properly with the whole process. The first thread almost always is around being really clear about looking at your beliefs about sleep. You know, I can survive on 6 hours sleep, all of that stuff. And, you know, that's all fine, but you'll be so much better if you get the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. And there are lots of different ways of developing and improving sleep. And none of them involve sleeping pills. Sleeping pills don't actually generate sleep. Obviously, if you've been prescribed sleeping pills, you need to talk to your doctor. You need to talk to the medics about that process. We're not doctors. We're fascinated by kind of the research and presenting you the information. So in terms of developing good sleep, it's first of all being clear about why we need good sleep. And there's lots of information that we can share with you. There's lots of information on our website, for example, actionyourpotential.org, just about the argument for good sleep. And there's incredibly powerful arguments for good sleep. But then it's about dealing with these individual behaviors. So I've mentioned most of these things in terms of what sleep's for. I've mentioned that it cleans the brain. It builds executive function. For example, behind the forehead is the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that manages the rest of the brain. That's the bit that helps us overcome procrastination. That's the bit that helps us strategize and plan. So if we're going to build great sleep, we need to build sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is having a dark, cool bedroom with no technology in it. And it's really important to get the bedroom temperature to be cool, not cold, but cool. One of the physiological triggers for sleep is a drop in body temperature. Having a nice cool bedroom really helps that process. And having a dark bedroom and having a bedroom where there is no technology in it. So sleep hygiene is incredibly important, making sure we're looking after that sleep space, the lead up into sleep and the lead out of sleep in the mornings. The next thing that we need to do, and we've got grids, if you're interested, we could share these with any of you. You've all signed up and we'll send you this webinar as a recording, and just reply if you need any of the materials I'm mentioning. You need to monitor your sleep. Now, you could do that using an app or a bit of software, but actually a bit of a spreadsheet with a few numbers on, where we're just making an assessment like, did I give myself enough sleep opportunity last night? Did I give myself a non-negotiable 8 hours in bed to give myself the opportunity to get the right amount of sleep? Was my sleep hygiene good? Was my bedroom dark and cool? And did I keep the technology out of the bedroom? Other things you can monitor are just the quality of sleep. You know, how good did that sleep feel? And then just monitor that out of 10. So 1, very poor, 10, really good, and monitor that process over the course of several weeks, because you will A, clock where you are, see where you're going, be able to map the improvement, and also see any bumps along the road. So when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when difficult things happen, sleep is affected. You know, it's slightly ironic and very upsetting that when you've got a big thing the next day, like an interview or something really important happening, sleep is often affected, because the brain is gearing itself up to solve tomorrow's problems. The brain is getting itself geared up and ready, and it's churning around using its sympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the part of the nervous system that is the antithesis of sleep. It's not about sleep, the sympathetic nervous system. That moment when you wake up in the middle of the night, for example, when you're kind of terrified by something, some thought about what's going to happen tomorrow, that feeling is because the prefrontal cortex, the top of the brain, the bit that manages the emotional brain, is offline when we're just emerging from sleep and we're all groggy, and therefore everything feels much more kind of charged, much more emotional. So it's really important to monitor sleep quality, sleep opportunity, and sleep hygiene. And I've mentioned what sleep opportunity is. It's just making sure we give ourselves enough chance to get that sleep. Another thread is to build in a wind down hour. Really look after sleep by building in a wind down hour. So watch a very familiar comedy, nothing too stressful, not Line of Duty, not some of those dark Scandinavian murder mysteries. Have a hot bath, that raises your body temperature. But as you get out of the bath, your body temperature drops. Listen to some calming music. There are lots of great apps with lots of kind of ambient noise or meditations that help you drift off to sleep. Build that into a set of habits. Perhaps one of the most important, in terms of the evidence, the most important, is regularizing sleep times linked to your circadian rhythms. So some of us are larks. We fall asleep early in the evening and wake up early in the morning. Some of us are owls. We fall asleep later in the night and wake up later in the morning. And some of us are somewhere between those two extremes. And it's about a third who are larks, a third in the middle, and a third who are owls. And we need to go to bed at the same time, linked to our point of maximum sleepiness. That's that point when you're nodding off in front of Netflix. So you need to be in bed at that time. We need to go to bed at the point of maximum sleepiness, and then we'll get up 8 hours later. And we need to do that every day of the week. We don't need to lay in at weekends. In fact, laying in generates a bit of jet lag effectively, because we're not opening our eyes, getting light in our eyes at the same time every day. And our eyes are directly linked to an area in the middle of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus that sips daylight and checks where we are in the world, what the daylight is, and that manages every body clock through every single cell across our body. And it's really important to link our sleep cycle to the day-night cycle that our body is tracking. That's why when we get the opportunity to go on planes again and go on holiday on long-haul flights, that's why that system's the one that suffers enormously when we're jet lagged. So we need to regularize our sleep times, make sleep a habit linked to that day-night cycle. If we want to get good sleep, we need to cut caffeine from about midday, reduce caffeine, get rid of it completely. Caffeine stops the action of fatigue, adenosine, plugs up the synapses, not allowing adenosine to build up. That feeling of fatigue, that scratchy-eyed feeling you get at the end of the day, that sort of brain fogginess, that is caused by adenosine. That's contributes to the other thing that sends us to sleep, which is called sleep pressure. So we need to cut caffeine so sleep pressure builds up healthily. Alcohol destroys dreaming sleep like domestos destroys bacteria. So we may feel that alcohol makes us drop off to sleep. It doesn't. It's a sedative, but it doesn't actually help us sleep. In fact, we don't sleep effectively until we've got rid of the alcohol. And if you're a smoker, you need to kind of make sure you're not smoking near bedtime, because nicotine is a stimulant and activates our brain. Ideally, obviously, there are so many reasons not to smoke. Sleep would just be one of them. And then another way of building great sleep, another strand of the net of building great sleep, is exercise, making sure that you're getting in at least 3 hours of exercise, at least 3 hours before bed, not 3 hours of exercise, maybe 20 minutes of exercise, a little bit away from bedtime. What exercise does, a lot of our days are spent being frazzled mentally. We're mentally tired. We've worked hard. We've been in meetings, been on Zooms. We've sat at desks, but actually we're not physically tired. We need to get out and move about as much as possible. Physical tiredness supports sleep. If you spent the whole day gardening, you are much more likely to get a good night's sleep if you've physically been active during the course of the day. We need to make sure we're processing our emotions every day, and we've got a whole series of materials on processing emotion. In a nutshell, brains that can explain their emotional experiences to themselves are able to move on from those experiences. If we don't process our emotion, we can remain stuck in our sympathetic nervous system, overthinking, experiencing anxiety, finding it much more difficult to fall asleep and to remain asleep. And we kind of wake ourselves up in the night. And then, I love that picture. Finally, it's really important that we try and separate eating from bed by at least 2 or 3 hours, because we don't want to connect the digestive process with sleep. It can often disrupt that whole kind of process. So that is the net to build great sleep. It would take you, if you were to go for it, it would take you around 8 to 10 weeks building in a few threads at a time. For example, I'd spend a couple of weeks just getting your head around why sleep's really important. There's a fantastic book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which is probably the best guide to everything about sleep. And then you introduce each of those threads over the following weeks. And thread 5 is a critical one that snaps a lot of the others kind of into place. And to get those threads to happen, you'd build it slowly but surely, several threads at a time, 8 to 12 weeks, monitoring sleep throughout that time so you can see the change over time. You might also need another net, which we talk about in a separate webinar, which is about living in a balanced nervous system, which is about how to use the rocks through the day to maintain productivity, to maintain focus, and to give our brain the connections that it needs to manage. And to finish off, just to kind of explore a new word, we talk a lot about these in our webinars, defrazzling, which is the process of applying balance to every day to maintain excellent productivity, mood, energy, and engagement. A frazzled brain is a brain full of adenosine, is a brain feeling overwhelmed, is a brain whose cognitive circuits are not being applied to some of the complexity that's coming in. If we give just emotional responses in the 21st century, we're more likely to create more problems than we solve. We need our whole brain to rock up. So self-care is not some indulgence. It is your first requirement. If you're going to be there for everyone else in your life, you need to be there for yourself first. Okay, so last few slides, just a couple of questions. Questions might people ask, how do I fall back asleep more quickly when I wake up in the middle of the night? A good way to do this is if you build a mindfulness habit during the daytime, that really helps that process. So if you can deep breathe, focus on your breathing during the daytime, 5 or 10 minutes of practice of mindfulness during the daytime, that in and out breathing method can become a metronome that you can use to activate your parasympathetic nervous system deep in the night and enable you to fall back asleep a little bit more quickly. We need to be in our parasympathetic nervous system to fall asleep. So using mindfulness in the daytime to sort of practice that process is really helpful in terms of getting us back to fall back asleep. And what can I do to help my sleep if I'm a shift worker? There are lots of suggestions that we can make to support sleep. To be honest, sleeping in the daytime is not as good as sleeping at night. We're designed to sleep at night. We are diurnal creatures. We're awake in the daytime, but there are ways that you can support your brain and body to sleep better if you're a shift worker. If you are a shift worker and it's possible to maintain the same shift, those rolling shifts that people experience where they're 8 hours on and then it changes the following week's a different 8 hours, and then the week after that it's a different 8 hours, that's probably the most difficult for the body to deal with. If you need more information on shift work and sleep, just get in touch. And then my child is experiencing night terrors. What can I do about that situation? So when we're waking in the middle of our night, children often experience enormously powerful dreams. Dreams are processing emotions. Opportunities to have a bit of white noise, a bit of gentle music, an opportunity for the child to re-engage their parasympathetic nervous system is a really good way to help them kind of calm their night terrors. Lots of kind of soft toys that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And then I think an opportunity to explain to children about what's happening when they sleep and when they're experiencing strong emotional situations as their brain is processing those emotions in sleep. Those are the times when we might have some of those night terrors. And as we're getting a little bit older, so we're moving from 7 to 8 to 9 years old, what's also happening is some of our anxiety circuits deep in our emotional brain are waking up in a way that they haven't before. When we're children, they're spending more time away from our parents. Those anxiety circuits are waking up. And nighttime is a time when those anxiety circuits will be much more vigilant, because in the ancestral environment, the night, obviously there were predators, there were dangers in the night. So that particular part of the brain that's waking up in children when they were 8, 9 or 10, that is much more sensitive at night suddenly in a way that it wouldn't have been before, because it wouldn't have woken up yet, because it basically, children below the age of about 6 or 7 rely on their parents to spot any problems in their world. Okay, thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday afternoon at the end of Mental Health Awareness Week. This has been recorded and we will share it with all the people that signed up. Have a lovely rest of weekend. I'll hang around briefly to answer any questions. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us.